Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast, and I am your host, John Puma. I'm also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord, as well as the moderator at Reddit's r/sake community.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I am a sake samurai, I'm a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing good.
That's great. It's December. It's starting to feel like December. Maybe a little late, but it's definitely starting to feel like December here in New York. It looks like December here in New York. There's Christmas lights everywhere. The tree is up. It's kind of nice. What do you think? Are you a holiday festive guy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
I love the holidays.
Now, do you do like the ugly holiday sweater thing?
That would be a no.
You know? Oh, come
No.
on. That's the fun. That's so much fun. I do that.
I believe it.
And it honestly, I didn't start doing it. People started buying them for me, and I was like, I'm gonna roll with this, and I'm gonna wear them, and they're fun. But yeah, it's nice. What is in store for us today?
Yeah, well, I picked up this really unique sake that led me down a complete rabbit hole. I thought I knew a lot about sake. I thought I knew a lot about sake, and then I discovered this whole corner I had never heard of, no idea. So
You heard it here first, folks. Tim Sullivan thought he knew a lot about sake until today.
but this one stumped me. But I did do some research and went down the rabbit hole and learned a little bit about this whole situation. And this takes us to a specialty yeast. Now, we've talked about yeast before on the show.
Yeah, we talked about specialty yeasts before on the show.
Yeah, like what have we had? We had
there was the whole Amabuki thing.
Yes.
Where they specialize in harvesting yeast from flowers, from plants.
Oh my God. We had the whole garden in there, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So many flowers. So flower yeast is one, and there's other types of specialty yeast.
Yeah, with the ambient yeast.
Ambient house yeast, like
Yeah.
literally falling off the earthen walls at the brewery. And today we're going to talk about another super specialized kind of yeast. And I think if you guessed for 6 months, you would never come across this one. I wouldn't have.
In all honesty, if I didn't have the bottle sitting in front of me and you had me guess, I would never. We'd be sitting here for like the episode would be 4 hours long, and it would just be me saying, "How about this?" And you're like, "No." Evergreens? No.
Yeah. Let's end the suspense, the cliffhanger, and tell people what we are going to be drinking. So we're going to be drinking a sake made with yeast that's propagated off of olives.
Huh. My first reaction was, huh.
Now, I have a sneaking suspicion you're not an olive guy in general.
Tim, I loathe olives.
Okay.
with a fiery passion. I
Wow.
don't like the flavor. I don't like the texture. I don't like the aroma. I don't like anything about olives. I don't get martinis because olives.
Well, someone invented a martini for someone like you. It's called a with a twist. Get it with some lemon.
With a
in
twist, and they don't have to have the skewered olives in it.
That's correct.
That's excellent. I will do that.
That's a news flash for you. Good.
Excellent.
Well, I love olives, so I can carry any olive loving energy for this episode on my shoulders because I think they're amazing. I love them on pizza. I love them on a charcuterie board. They're salty and briny, and I think they're super yummy. So maybe this will be my home court advantage for this episode.
Excellent. So olive yeast. Tell me what's going on here.
Did you even know that Japan made olive oil, its own olive oil. I didn't know this.
As an Italian American, I'm suspicious, because we're supposed to have the market cornered on that stuff.
Yes. Well, around 1908 or so, about 115 years ago, they decided to try to start growing olive trees in Japan. And they picked a kind of remote place. It's Kagawa Prefecture.
Really?
This is a small, out-of-the-way prefecture. It's on Shikoku Island, which is the smallest of the 4 main islands.
Right.
And we've talked about Kochi on the show before, Kochi Prefecture. So this is north of that region.
Yes, exactly.
And it faces the Seto Inland Sea.
It's right next to Ehime, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think I know exactly where you're talking about.
Yes. So if you look at Shikoku Island, it's kind of on the north and the eastern side. That area is where we're talking about. And apparently the environment and the climate is similar to Mediterranean vibes. So they said, why don't we try to grow some olives here? And in a few years, they started to grow trees and got their first harvest. And then this became the epicenter of the Japanese olive oil industry. So I think 99% of all olive oil made in Japan comes from Kagawa Prefecture.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed this.
I had never heard of that either.
In fact, when you said like this region that was had the temperature of the Mediterranean, I thought it was going to be like Okinawa or something like that. Kind of often in the water or nice and humid. So very surprised to hear that it is in fact Kagawa Prefecture.
Yeah. So they started growing olives there, started making olive oil, and so many places in Japan have their regional product. We've talked about this a lot in the past, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're often very proud of the regional stuff.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. And they started to grow olives there, produce olive oil. This became really famous. And then I discovered something in 2011. They created the most expensive and rare Wagyu in the world, apparently.
Wagyu's already pretty expensive, Tim.
So there's an island off the coast of Kagawa, part of Kagawa, called Shodoshima Island. And this is one of the main regions where a lot of the olive oil comes from. And they also have Wagyu cattle on this island. And in 2011, there was a farmer who didn't like seeing all the waste from the olive oil being produced. So he started feeding the squished olives after they go through the mill to make the olive oil. He started feeding these leftover olive bits to his Wagyu, and apparently it makes delicious beef. So several places I've read online, when I was searching for the information about this olive oil, this thing about Wagyu kept coming up, and I'm like, what's this? So this is a very famous offshoot of this olive oil production, and now it's some of the most expensive and rare Wagyu is this olive-fed Wagyu beef.
And obviously we've got some of that to taste today too.
No, we don't.
No?
I heard about your hatred of olives, so I sent the Wagyu back to Japan.
I like the beef, Tim.
I'm just kidding. No, unfortunately, we don't have the rarest Wagyu available.
I think we would need another Patreon tier if we wanted to.
Yes, exactly. And then, so that brings us up to 2011. And then in 2016, the Sake Brewers Association of Kagawa got together, and they were really lamenting the fact that the percentage of people drinking sake was really going down. Now, that's been a well-known fact for a long time. But they said maybe they can make something with their local products that can revive interest in sake. And since Kagawa, basically, I learned recently, equals olives, they hit on this idea to make sake from yeast that's cultivated off of olive plants, olive trees.
So they're getting a lot out of these olive trees now. They've got olives. I imagine they just use them for, olive eating, for people who are into eating olives and putting on pizza perhaps. You've got the olive oil that they're making. You got the feed that they're using for this Wagyu beef,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got them also producing sake yeast off of this, huh?
Yeah, and there's a couple other things too. I saw that they make cosmetics out of the olive oil, and they also carve the olive wood, and they make like spatulas and cutting boards and things like that.
Wow. I mean, it's funny. You've heard of like use every part of the animal, but they're using every part of the plant.
Yes. Exactly. So the Sake Brewers Association threw down the gauntlet and they said, okay, we want to make a successful, delicious sake from olive yeast, since we're all about olives here in Kagawa. So they asked the Prefectural Industry Technology Center to help them out. And in 2016, they began collecting yeast samples. They collected from flowers on the olive tree. They collected from the fruit, the little olives itself, from the leaves. And they did a few years of development, and they hit a snag.
Uh-oh.
The yeast, they found yeast that would produce alcohol, but it was dying at around 15% alcohol. So when they brewed with it and they made a sake mash, the sake yeast would die at around 15% alcohol, which is too low. We need to get up higher than that when we make sake. In most cases, you want a really robust, alcohol-tolerant yeast.
Mm.
So they did, I think they did some trick where they tried to propagate the yeast in an alcohol medium from the get-go, and that naturally selected for the alcohol-tolerant yeast. And then they found 2 strains that made it up to 18% alcohol. And then they were ready to go.
Not bad.
Yeah, they did some genetic testing to make sure it was the right strain of yeast. And then they recruited 4 breweries in Kagawa to begin making sake. And the first round of this was released in 2020. And I think there's only 6 breweries in Kagawa. So they got over a pretty big majority of the breweries are on this olive project.
Nice. I'm glad they got a decent sample set.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. And so this is a relatively new to market product.
Yes.
And we're getting it in the US already in 2022.
Yeah. So there's only one of these olive sakes that's exported to the States. And I think I haven't seen it before, I think this year. So I think it's relatively new, right?
Yeah. I think it's pretty new here.
Yeah. So that catches us up on the history of olive oil in Kagawa Prefecture. Who knew we would be talking about this today?
I did not.
I did not either.
Yeah.
So, John, do you want to give us a little introduction to the sake that we're going to be tasting? We can talk a little bit about this, one of these 6 breweries here that's helping us out today.
I would love to. So this is the Kawatsuru Olive. We're going simple on the name, Tim. Kawatsuru Olive. And this is a Junmai Ginjo. The alcohol is down at 14%. The rice is something that's interesting. I don't think I've heard of this rice before. Sanuki Yoi Mai.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar. This is the first time I'm encountering it. The rice polishing ratio is 55%, so it's firmly in that Junmai Ginjo territory. And the brewery is Kawatsuru Shuzo, and they have exported other products to the U.S. in the past, and still do. And they were founded in 1891. So, they're somehow a sake brewery that is younger than the United States. I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, and one of the key words you mentioned, it's part of the name of the rice, is Sanuki. So Sanuki is one of the sub-regions of Kagawa Prefecture, and it is really ground zero for the olive growth and olive production. So this is actually called Sanuki Olive Yeast. So it's this region of Kagawa Prefecture in particular is associated with the olive yeast.
So the olive yeast is coming from Sanuki and the rice. So they're going all in on Sanuki.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. And there is a website which we will link in the show notes, Sanuki Olive Yeast.jp. So they have built a whole website and they have an English version and a Japanese version. They have a Twitter, a Facebook, an Instagram, and a YouTube. And they have launched like a major marketing campaign in Japan promoting the Sanuki Olive Yeast idea. And they have a catchphrase too.
Oh, I want to hear it. What is the catchphrase?
Okay, this is plastered all over their website.
All right, I'm ready. It's got to be very catchy.
Okay, quote, full mind, full body, filled with Sanuki olive yeast.
I don't know if I want to fill my body with Sanuki olive yeast necessarily. If I were into the olives, maybe I would be into, and if perhaps the Wagyu is filled with Sanuki olive yeast too, I'm down with that.
Yes. I think their heart's in the right place here.
It is, definitely. Perhaps something was lost in translation.
Yes. So the text of the Sanuki Olive Yeast website goes on to explain that they want to communicate the nature, the flavors, and the humor of the people of the Sanuki region through this sake, through this yeast. And they've given it to these 4 breweries to try to make sake. And again, as I said before, this was first released in 2020. So this is a whole new thing. And they are not skimping on the promotional materials here. So there's lots to dig into if you want more information than we can provide in a 30-minute podcast on Sanuki yeast.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, I wish somebody would produce a sake that relayed my humor. That would be great.
Oh, I don't know. Would that be a sweet or a sour sake, John Puma?
Salty. Salty.
Salty?
Very salty.
All right, I believe it.
Yes. Anyway, I'm excited to try this. Now, before we do anything else, have you tasted this sake before in any situation?
No, I have never tasted the sake before.
Okay, neither have I. So I am very excited because, I like when we get these like live reactions. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Are you ready to fill your mind and your body with Sanuki olive yeast?
There's only one way to find out.
All right, let's get this open. All right, so before we take a smell here, I just want to describe the label a little bit. So there is basically kind of like a watercolor illustration of an olive branch with some beautiful leaves and a few ripening olives on it. It says Kawatsuru on it, and very prominently says olive on the bottom right.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
This label reminds me a lot of wine.
Oh, that is a very good point. I agree with that.
That's the first thing I think of when I look at the label. The second thing is perhaps olive oil, but the first thing is definitely wine. It does not make me think sake, which is very interesting. It's they're trying to go and branch out. I think that's important to do sometimes when you're making an interesting product. You want to get people who aren't your contemporary sake drinkers, and this is to get somebody's attention that doesn't usually drink sake.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. If you handed this bottle to someone and said, "What's in here?" Well, there's an illustration of the olive, and it says olive on it. I would think it would be olive oil. It kind of looks like an artisan olive oil bottle, but
it does a little bit.
Yeah. But it's not craft Japanese sake, as it says. And looking at it in the wine glass, it looks like a Chardonnay. It has a white wine color to it for me.
It does. It really does. It's an excellent point.
Yeah. All right. So interesting label, interesting color. Let's give it a smell. Okay. Now I know the burning question on everyone's mind is, does it smell like olives? Does it taste like olives? Well, we'll tackle the first question first. Does it smell like olives? I don't think so. Not at all.
I am relieved to say it does not.
Yeah.
What does it smell like? It's interesting. I get a little bit of an ethanol, but I also get like something almost herbal. I want to say maybe a little cut grass kind of thing.
Well, I do have a sheet here from the distributor. Should I list off a few of the aroma profiles that they've called out for this.
I am very curious as to what they put down.
All right. They say here musk melon, white flowers, green pear with a hint of grass and salinity. So you nailed it. You nailed the grass there, John.
There's a very faintly floral, tiny bit, like it's Mother's Day and you're in the other room. But it's not like walking past Bed Bath & Beyond. It's very subtle.
Right. The floral profile that I'm picking up on is like a white lily. A little bit
like perfumed in that way. Yes,
exactly.
Yes. But
subtle.
It's very faint, very subtle. Yes. It's not beating you over the head in any way.
The aroma is also like a little bit melony, but not fresh cut tropical melon. It's more like the syrup off of melon in a fruit salad. It smells concentrated and a little bit rich.
Maybe, yeah. Okay. Maybe like a honeydew almost. Definitely not like cantaloupe or anything like that. All right. I think we're ready for a taste.
Yeah, let's give it a taste.
Like the most aroma analysis we've done on a sake in months.
Okay. It does not taste like olives.
No, it does not. It doesn't taste like any sake I've had before. I don't think. This is very unique.
Yes.
But it does not taste like olives either, as you pointed out.
It has a rich texture.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
And sweet versus dry, I think it lands just a touch on the sweeter side. We don't have an SMV number for this one, but there's a viscosity to the palate. There's a thickness here, and it reads just a hint on the sweet side for me.
I agree. A tiny bit on the sweet side. What is this? It's so interesting. I'm fascinated by this. This is
it is really,
lovely.
really interesting.
So you mentioned grass and salinity in the tasting notes, and it almost tastes a little salty. And I was trying to figure out like what it like. There's a note in there that I've never had in a sake before, and I think it's the salinity. Like I don't think I've ever experienced that before. And it's not unwelcome. It goes with this sake pretty well. I'm very curious to see what kind of food this would pair with. I feel like it would probably be fairly formidable, but not like Yamahai territory, but like I think it would go pretty well with some interesting stuff. A little more Western style, I think.
Olives are often introduced into cuisine to bring that saltiness in there. Yeah. And I wonder if that is coming through or if our minds are just playing tricks on us, but that little bit of salinity, a little bit of saltiness, or maybe a little oceanic breeze happening comes from the olive yeast part of it. Could be.
So the distributor also has some food pairing ideas here. And they say they try this with salad with carrot ginger dressing, which that kind of typical Japanese salad dressing. Coconut crab curry. Or spring pea and mint gazpacho. Now, the crab curry sounds like it would go. That sounds phenomenal with this. Like that sounds really good with this sake, I think. And I can easily imagine it with that ginger dressing as well. I think that flavor that the ginger brings will play well with the salinity and the flavors that are going on with the sake, I think.
One thing that ties those two together, like the ginger dressing and the crab curry, both of those things tend to have a little bit of a bite to them. Like they can be just a hint spicy, not like chili spice, but just they have a little bite.
Ginger spice.
Ginger spice.
Yeah.
I'm spooky spice. No. No, scary spice.
Scary spice, not scary. So this would be purely ginger spice.
So ginger spice and curry spice, just a little heat, a little warmth, and then the sweetness and the richness, the melony richness here can really coat that, and the saltiness balances it all out. It's really sounds delicious to me. I also mentioned at the top of the episode that I love a charcuterie board with olives. So if I had my charcuterie board with some cheese, some prosciutto, maybe a few black olives on there, that would go really well with this. I think that would be great.
This would be a really good antipasta pairing sake.
For me, it would.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to be honest with you. I was a little apprehensive about this whole olive thing going in.
You were.
Yeah, I know. I was secretly apprehensive. You were openly apprehensive. And this is really lovely to sip on. It's very enjoyable. Really like this.
It's nice. And I think that combination of the melon and the salt is so weird and interesting, and it works more than it should on paper to me. Like, when I think about those two ideas together, I'm like, well, I would never put salt on my melon. But now I'm like, should I put salt on some melon? Like, this is very interesting.
Have you ever had prosciutto wrapped melon?
No, I have not.
It's kind of that same idea.
Okay.
You take super thinly sliced salty prosciutto, which is heaven on earth, and then you take some really sweet, juicy melon cubes, and then or slices, and then you wrap the prosciutto around and you eat them together. So it's that same thing you're talking about, where you get the juiciness from some melon and a little salty umami layered over that. It's really good.
Wow, I might be discovering a new flavor profile for myself.
Yes. So the vibes are definitely there, kind of prosciutto and melon vibes for sure. Really good.
Very nice. So yeah, this was I want to say that, like, when we have a lot of these little these unusual sakes with unusual ingredients, sometimes we get a little apprehensive, sometimes we get a little nervous, sometimes they don't work out the way we want them to. I want to say this one's pretty successful.
Yeah, and the thing I enjoyed the most, besides drinking the sake with you, was learning about this whole region of Japan and this whole local specialty I've honestly never heard of.
I had no idea.
15 years of studying Japan and learning about the different regions. I'd never heard of Sanuki olives or the Wagyu olive beef or Kagawa's olive oil. I've never heard of any of this. So now I'm fascinated, and next time I'm in that neck of the woods, I'm definitely going to go check this out.
But you've never been to Kagawa, right?
I've never been to Kagawa. I've been to Kochi. You've been to Kochi as well. So we've both been to Shikoku, but we've not been to the northern part of the island.
Right.
And looking on the Sanuki Olive Yeast website, they have some beautiful photos of the olive groves and the Seto Inland Sea, and it looks absolutely beautiful. So next time I go there, I'm going to get ready to fill my mind and my body with Sanuki Olive Yeast.
Or at least the olives.
The olives. Or the Wagyu, for sure.
I think that it's by the transitive property. Well, that was a lot of fun. That was nice, Tim. Thanks for bringing this one in.
Yeah, we dove deep into another interesting yeast. And when we have another interesting yeast, we're going to continue this series and kick the can down the road. But for now, I just want to say thank you, John, for tasting and being brave soldier. And
hey, that's what I'm here for.
And thanks for tasting today. And I also want to thank our listeners so much for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying Sake Revolution. If you'd like to show your support for our show, one really great way to help us out is to join our lovely community on Patreon. We're a listener-supported show, and all the support we receive from our patrons allows us to host, edit, and produce a podcast for you each and every week.
And did you know there are other ways to support us? You can tell your friends, but I'm sure you're already telling your friends. But something you can do that you may not have thought of is leaving a review about us on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. This really helps other people discover our show. It's a really one review is a way to get one review is worth telling 10 friends. So please, by all
Have
means,
you done the math on that?
Totally, yes. It's flawless. So please, by all means, get out there and get a review up on your podcast platform of choice. It really does help people discover our show.
And be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com. There you can see our wonderful show notes we prepare each week, and we also have a written transcript of each and every episode.
Mm-hmm. I hope you guys still have some sake left, so we're going to ask you to raise your glass. Remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.